Before we begin, I would like to dedicate this episode to insomniagamers.net, a wonderful group of streamers on a channel that is live 24/7 with games from all genres for all tastes, so don't forget to check them out. Merry Christmas everybody and enjoy the show! Mr.Driller is a puzzle game developed and published by Namco in 1999, originally an arcade game and later ported to the PlayStation, Game Boy Color, Dreamcast and many other platforms. The goal of this very colorful puzzle game is simple. While in a side view of the earth, you must dig down until you reach a certain depth. You can dig the block under you and blocks to your side. All adjacent blocks of the same color will be drilled if they were one. You can also climb one block to your side. As you drill, all unsupported blocks will fall due to gravity, and you must avoid being squashed by them. While falling, blocks will stick to other blocks of the same color, and if 4 or more blocks of the same color stick while falling, they will pop. To keep you on the move, Mr.Driller doesn't have a time limit, instead you have an air meter mechanic. As time passes, your air level will decrease, and you can replenish it by collecting air capsules, each being worth 20% air. Run out of air and you will suffocate, losing a life. Finally, there are one kind of block with a big cross over them. These blocks take 5 button taps to break and will take 20% air away from you, the same amount as an air capsule, creating a clever obstacle but not an impossible one. You begin each stage with 3 lives and your air meter will fully replenish upon a loss of a life. This take on puzzle games was very refreshing in '99 and still relevant today. It's an action puzzle game really. You have a character and you take initiative. Everything that happens to the game state is a direct consequence of your moves. Nothing is randomly thrown at you. If you get squashed by a block, it's because you digged under it and you weren't paying enough attention to what was above you. Also, since you are always running against time and you can only drill when you are touching a block, it becomes a very interesting mix between a puzzle game and a rhythm game. Years before these were even a thing. Mr.Driller features 3 modes of difficulty in its arcade mode, changing the goal depth and width of the board with each setting. While very fun at first, the gameplay of Mr.Driller can get monotonous, so the home console ports introduced the time attack mode. In time attack, the goal is still the same, but within a very strict time limit, and the predefined levels are designed for the player to follow a certain pattern, collecting time bonuses along the way. While only a handful of stages are available, these are incredibly fun and challenging, and personally the best part of this classic game. The character of Mr.Driller is Sumo Hori, the highest ranked driller in the world, by the World Association of whoever ranks these things anyway. He is the son of Taizo Hori, the star of 1982's Namco arcade game Dig Dug, and Tobi Kisimasuyu, the star of 1985's Namco arcade game Baraduke. While Baraduke is an amazing game in its own right, basically being Metroid a whole decade before Metroid, I mean, it even has the "it was a girl the whole time" reveal at the end. It's in Dig Dug we're going to focus for now. As I said, Dig Dug is an arcade classic, later ported for many home consoles, namely the NES. As with Mr.Driller, the game is viewed from the side of the earth, but the goal is actually to inflate to death all the enemies on screen. In 1985, Namco followed with a sequel, Dig Dug 2, radically changing the formula. Now from a top view, the goal is still to kill all enemies on screen, but now you can use stakes spread across the island to break off pieces of land into the ocean. More than a decade later, some of the staff at Namco started developing Dig Dug 3, and the executives liked it so much it became a main project, but the gameplay was extensively changed, so it was decided to create a new IP altogether, thus Mr.Driller was born. In the year 2000, a sequel followed, Mr.Driller 2, another arcade game, this time ported to the Game Boy Advance. It introduced Anna, a female counterpart to Susumu, as a playable character. It also introduced 2-player versus via link cable. Endless mode, which is arcade mode without the goal depth, and some items in the time attack mode. Not a lot of improvement, but welcome changes nonetheless. And Mr.Driller 2 was the last main game to be imported to the West, but back in Japan, the franchise lived on. In 2001, Mr.Driller G for Great was released for arcades and ported to the PlayStation in Japan only. It expanded the cast to the standard 6 of today, introducing Taizo Hori, Pucci the dog, Ataro Hori, Susumu's brother, and Hollinger Z as playable characters. It features two-player couch versus, with race mode where players race to reach a certain depth first, and survival mode where players just drill trying not to die, while collecting power-ups that mess with the other player board state, rotating their board and whatnot. While race mode is very unbalanced, having no sort of handicap other than the character's static abilities, for example Hollinger Z as an extra life when hit, the survival mode features well-implemented handicap in the form of starting lives for each player. The survival mode is couch versus done well. Also in Mr.Driller G, we have a more fleshed out story, with episodes presented like old cartoons, slowly introducing the characters to the overall story arc. But the most welcomed game mode introduced is what it would later be known as Drystone Driller. In this mode, the air meter doesn't decrease over time, instead, every time you drill a block, you lose 1% air. Along the stages, you will find collectible dry stones of 3 colors: red, blue and yellow. When used, red stones will break all visible blocks of a certain color or type, blue dry stones will transform a lot of the visible blocks to a certain color, and yellow dry stone will give you different temporary power-up, like faster moving speed or multiple block breaking. Drystone Driller is the not-so-obvious evolution of the gameplay of Mr.Driller, giving another layer of strategy to what would otherwise be just another iteration of the arcade style. Mr.Driller G would be followed in 2002 by Mr.Driller A for Ace, this time a Game Boy Advance exclusive title. The story mode is now exclusively Drystone Driller mode, relegating the classic mode to arcade or mission mode, but implementing power-ups in them. Also to note, the time attack mode was entirely removed in favor of the racing mode. This mode is just a championship of versus race, but instead with 5 bot characters, very fun nonetheless. After Mr.Driller A, Susumu Hori makes a cameo in Star Trigun, another arcade game by Namco which has the particularity of being played with one single button. Still in the year of 2002, Japan got the pentacle of Mr.Driller, Mr.Driller Drill Land, an exclusive for the Nintendo GameCube. In Drill Land, all 6 characters are invited to an underground drilling amusement park. They take the elevator down and a massive open-air park awaits them. Yes, open air as in clouds and everything, while underground. Everything here is split into minigames, paying homage to the different game modes, and beating them slowly unwraps the story, culminating in a final boss. The first minigame is Dryland World Tour. It's classic Mr.Driller gameplay. You can choose your character and the static ability it brings. Each 100 meters the location changes to give you the feeling of traveling the world. And that theme song. The second minigame is the Hall of Druaga. Paying homage to Tower of Druaga, another Namco arcade game, the player plays as Anna dressed as a knight, playing Drystone Driller but with enemies, a dragon, keys and doors thrown into the mix. At the end, you find the boss whom you must use red Drystones to beat, and you watch a cutscene of Anna saving Princess Susumu. Yes, Princess Susumu, dress and all. The third minigame is Horror Night House. You play as a Taro Hori dressed as a vampire, and you must collect holy water that you can inject into blocks, trapping ghosts in them. Breaking these ghost blocks will award you gems, and collecting enough of them will move you to the next level. The fourth minigame is Drindy Adventure. You play as Taizo Hori dressed as Indiana Jones, and your goal is to collect a certain amount of golden statues before you reach the goal depth, all while escaping from traps like rolling boulders and spikes. The last minigame is Star Driller, a pun on Star Dragon. You play as Susumu dressed as an astronaut, in arcade Mr.Driller gameplay, but with power-ups thrown into the mix. To complement the minigames, shops are available where you can spend the amount of miles you already drilled into collectibles and power-ups for the minigames. There's also a library with information on characters, a theater where you can view the cutscenes, a disc store where you can listen to the soundtrack, and a store where you can link up with Mr.Driller A on the Game Boy Advance. Finally, there's also a parade with all the characters of the franchise, and a 4-player couch versus. Mr.Driller Drill Land was developed as a celebration of everything Mr.Driller has to offer, and it really shows. Everything is here. The characters, the game modes, the multiplayer, the presentation, everything is here and done flawlessly. Well, everything but the time attack. But still, the best entry in the franchise without a doubt. Now this is where we face a problem. There is nowhere to go now. Namco already did the best Mr.Driller they could make. So the franchise started going downhill, with remakes and watered-down entries. In 2004, for the Nintendo DS, we got Mr.Driller Drill Spirits, a simplified version of Mr.Driller A but with 4-player versus via wireless, and the Pressure Driller mode, which is a mix between the Horror Night House and the final boss in Drill Land. In 2006, a quick mention to the actual sequel in the Dig Dug series, Dig Dug Drilling Strike. Mixing the gameplay of Dig Dug 1 and 2, it fails miserably in both, making the whole game feel like you're playing Dig Dug 1 as a minigame in order to progress Dig Dug 2 gameplay. While the story is a nice touch, tying the Dig Dug and Mr.Driller storylines together, it is not enough to make the game worthwhile. After 2006, it's truly misery for the franchise. Every entry on the following list is a very watered down version of Mr.Driller 1 or Mr.Driller A gameplay with little to no story or gameplay modes. While the franchise is not necessarily dead, it's hard to imagine it will ever be relevant as it once was. Anyway, it is an interesting example of the living cycle of a gaming franchise, and all under the span of 3 years actually. A new idea leads to a first game, the mechanics get improved, multiplayer is implemented, the franchise is celebrated, and then it dies out because there is nothing else to innovate in its mechanics. A shame really. Behind, Namco leaves an interesting series, connecting multiple franchises story-wise, all in a beautiful and colorful package you can enjoy on the go or on the couch with friends, if you're into importing games from Japan of course. I hope you enjoyed this look into the franchise of Mr.Driller. A series of games many don't fully know in the West, but one that offers a completely different take on what a puzzle game can be. I'm Divagante for Dust of the Relic, thank you very much for watching and I hope to see you guys next time.